everybody. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Tonight, I think you're gonna learn and discover new insights. And my goal for tonight's workshop really is to give you one nugget, if at least, to allow you to really connect, advocate, and see your children through a different lens. So tonight's workshop is really about presenting you with a different lens through which we can look at learning, behavioral, and socialization challenges. Tonight is going to be a lecture or a workshop about uncovering, unraveling, and understanding root cause behind learning socialization challenges. It's actually a lecture about brain development, a typical healthy brain trajectory that potentially might have had something happen to it that is altering and showing us these behaviors as a result. So behaviors are there for a reason. They actually tell us more about the individual than we are led to believe. It actually tells us what is their capacity and where are they in the brain hierarchy in the sense of how they're connecting, learning, and engaging from their world. Tonight, I'm not going to be offering you any magic bullets. It really doesn't exist, but I am going to offer you a lens through which we can look at why our children and our adults suffering and dealing with so many behavioral, learning, and socialization challenges. I am not claiming that I know it all. However, I am committed to continuing to learn about this topic, and I have spent a lot of time learning about it up to this point. I am certified in Focus Academy, which is a brain-based pediatric approach to learning, behavioral, and socialization challenges. I have certification in International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, which allows me to really use the latest and greatest techniques and approaches to addressing children issues and specific health challenges through a holistic and manner, okay? And that's a little bit about me. My goal again for you guys tonight is to really, if nothing else, to have one insight that you will take away from here that will allow you to again connect, advocate, as well as see your children and perhaps yourself, depending on who brought you here tonight, and to offer you a way that we can create teams that will offer us a result and a speed in which we can get the outcomes that you guys' families are looking for nowadays. Who's confused about a chiropractor talking about brain development? And what does chiropractic really have to do with that? Well, raise your hands, show of hands. What comes to mind when you think about chiropractic care? Right? Cracking, low back pain, neck pain, adults, right? Children, not so much. Well, I'm just briefly going to address that, and then we're going to move on from chiropractic piece. Chiropractic is founded on neurology. It's founded on the communication inside our body, which is our brain, spinal cord, and the rest of the peripheral nerves. And how is that system interpreting our external and internal environment, and how is it going to respond, okay? Myself, I am a pediatric and family chiropractor with focus in neurostructural correction. What that means is that my focus is going to be the spinal integrity and how that impacts the communication between the brain and the rest of the body. And what we know is that subluxation, or this neurostructural shift, is actually a stress response by the body that is altering the way the brain receives information. The minute the brain has altered input, it is automatically going to create an altered output. Most of you have guys heard the adage, garbage in, garbage out, okay? So learning and behavioral and socialization challenges, I will show you guys later when we get to the brain hierarchy, how they're actually just, again, showing us the capacity of the individual to respond to stress and where they are on the hierarchy in the perspective of how they're engaging, learning, and connecting with their world. Why is this a critical discussion, guys? Why does this matter? Why should we be concerned about this talk? I am going to share some statistics which are actually quite alarming. 1 in 6 children have a developmental disability. Dyslexia is about 20% in our school-age children. ADD and ADHD, 1 out of 10 children will be diagnosed. OCD, anxiety, is rampant, okay? These numbers are skyrocketing, and that is a problem. We need to ask why. There has to be a reason, right? So if I was to ask you, what are some potential reasons behind this, what would you say? We are diagnosing this more. Absolutely, better diagnosis system. Yes, it probably accounts for about 5% increase. What about it's genetic? Potentially, but what we know about genetics is actually that our lifestyle choices and our lifestyle either turn them on or off. A really good resource for you guys to look into and to delve into is Bruce Lipton's work on epigenetics and his book, Biology of Belief. What about the fact that we are here with our cell phones, right? How is this here impacting our physical activity, right? Physical activity has decreased while our sedentary as well as blue light has increased tremendously. That has a huge impact on our brain. What about our foods? What about our interventions on how we bring children into this world? C-section has rocketed in numbers over the last decade. That has to have an impact on our children. What else? What else is going on? Is anybody going to bring up the elephant in the room? Vaccines. My job is not to tell you what to do or what not to do. My job as a healthcare provider is to allow you to make an informed and educated decision around understanding what a vaccine does. It's designed to do a neuroimmunological response, stress response by the body. So when we understand that, you are capable of making the decision that's right for you and your family. But I mentioned a lot of things here. What is that thread that binds all of these things together? It's a stressor. All of these things are stressors to the body. So what does stress have to do with potentially learning, behavioral, socialization challenges? Well, stress comes in 3 forms. We have it in chemical, physical, and emotional. And this concept of stress wreaking havoc on the body actually boils down to this concept. Let me make sure I can clean this properly. I am going to draw a diagram here, which we call a triangle diagram. You will see for a reason why in just a second. So I have a literal triangle here. We're going to draw a brain here. We're going to put stress here. And we're going to put a response or subluxation or neurostructural shift up there. Okay, what do we know about the brain at birth? Brain at birth is not fully developed. It has to go through a proper, typical, normal brain trajectory of development. In the presence of stress, that growth is stunted. Why? Because if the person is under stress too much, the body responds to it with a stress response. That stress response is called autonomic dysfunction. Many of you may know it as sympathetic dominance, okay? So when this happens in the body, the spine locks. It does not properly move. Spine has 24 vertebrae. They are individually moving segments. So if one of those gets stuck, it alters the way the brain receives sensory information. Altered input drives altered output. Okay? Stress again comes in 3 forms: physical, emotional, and chemical. And it can be during any time or stage in our life. It can be during preconception. It can be during labor. It can be during pregnancy or post-delivery. Okay? So I want to take you back, guys, to what this response really looks like. This sympathetic dominance. Let's pretend you guys are walking, or you guys are on a hike, walking down the trail with a few of your closest friends. You guys are laughing, everything is going peachy, and all of a sudden a bear jumps at you. What are you going to do? You're going to do one of 3 things. You're going to freeze, you're going to fight, or you're going to flee. Okay? It is absolutely okay to be in a stress response physiologically for about 15 to 20 minutes, short periods of time. Anything above that, it's harmful to the body. We, however, because of the environment we live in and the lifestyles we lead, are probably 90% of our life in that sympathetic dominant state. That is a huge problem for us adults, but an even bigger problem for our children. Biological law says that you cannot be in growth and survival at the same time. What did I just say the brain needs to do for the first 6-7 years of our life? It needs to grow. Therefore, we cannot have sympathetic dominance. We cannot be in a survival mode. What happens when you are in a survival mode? There are 3 things that really happened in a survival mode. We go into flexion, which is a protective mechanism to protect the internal organs. The next thing happens is the blood circulation goes into our extremities so that, again, we can fight or we can flee. And the last thing that happens is it takes us from our most executive processing center, which is our prefrontal cortex, into our brainstem. We start acting on instinct. It's me against you. It's me against the world. That is not how we're meant to live. And most of you, majority of the world, lives that way. That is a huge problem. So, how does the brain develop? Brain develops in a specific trajectory or architecture, and it happens like this. It grows from right to left, from bottom to top, from inside out. It develops like a flower. It requires a proper input in order to create a proper output, okay? And it develops from bottom top, back to front, right to left, and inside out, okay? That trajectory needs to be nurtured. And again, if we have stress that an individual cannot properly adapt or resist by their physiology, which is the job of your nervous system, your brain, and your spinal cord, we go into sympathetic dominance. It automatically draws us into a survival mode. It's not if, it's not maybe, that's how physiology works. So, let's talk a little bit about how the brain develops through the hierarchies. What do you guys think is the primitive, most basic tool an individual, an infant, uses to process, engage, connect with the world? What do you guys think? Infantile movement reflexes. We have a slew of them. The rooting reflex, the sucking reflex, the Moro reflex, the Galant reflex. These reflexes here are present between 0 to about 1 year of age, but that is a very weird one. 1 year of age. Babinski reflex, which is found on our feet, integrates at about 2 years of age. These infantile movement reflexes facilitate the next tool that we, the next sophisticated tool that we use to engage, process our world. It comes around age 1. What do you guys think that is? Movement and touch. Why do we want to make sure that the child is putting a lot of things in their mouth? Why is it a concern of a provider that they are not doing that? Why are we worried about them holding their head up above their shoulders at the age of 6 months of age or a little bit before that? Why is that important? Why does it matter that they can rock on both hands and knees back and forth at around 9 months? Why does that matter? Why are we asking ourselves, if they're not doing that, there's potentially something going on, and we need to look at that. We need to uncover where is the gap. What is potentially happening, and how do we fill in the gap so that they can do that and move on to the next stage? The next tool that we use is auditory and verbal. This is when we start to make sounds. This happens at about 3 years of age. Okay? This is when language starts to develop, okay? And then the last tool we call visual cognition. This has nothing to do with your eyesight. Vision is in the occipital lobe, your mind's eye, perceiving the future, predicting what's going to happen, making executive decision, control of your behaviors, all happens in the prefrontal cortex. Woo! Sorry, guys. Prefrontal cortex. That is the highest center, the most sophisticated tool an individual can use to engage, connect, process, and learn from their world. It is about 5 or 6 years of age that it starts, and then full development happens at 28 years of age to 30. Don't you think it's important to nurture the development of this lobe, of this center that really determines our behaviors and our outcome in life? Really, what I'm presenting you guys here is a model of expression of life, not the deficit model. We're always looking for ways to improve the individual's expression of life and how well are they performing in their environment. Okay? So let's break this into some examples. Let's suppose you have two people, Alex and Jason, who are walking through the door. Alex went through a typical normal trajectory of brain development, while Jason here is at movement and touch. He best engages with the world through movement and touch. Who is going to touch more things in this room? Tricky question. Who is going to touch more things in this room? I, who is going to be using my mind's eye, the highest center in my brain, is going to know that all these chairs in front of me are the same. I'm going to know the texture of this wall. I don't have to lick it. I'm not going to have to touch every chair to determine that they're the same. However, for Jason, because that's how he processes his world, he's going to touch absolutely every single thing in this room. We call that behavior hyperactivity. It is 100% normal, expected, correct for Jason to do that. When the demand exceeds neurological readiness, we have deflection, a gap, a behavior. Hyperactivity is a gap from a full brain processing. Let's suppose now we have Jason and we're going to put him in school. We're going to expect him to sit in a chair, pay attention, and we're going to ask him to start reading. We're going to ask him to interpret these symbols that are written on a page, turn them into a picture in his brain, which he's not very good at, and ask him to, again, create pictures in his own head and verbally depict that same picture into my own brain. That's called communication. That's called language. That's called speaking. He's not very good at it. What's going to happen? He's going to be a disruption in class. He's going to be throwing pencils at his classmates. He's going to be fidgeting, and he's going to become a problem child. He is not a problem child. He is the child who's telling us he is where he's at because of the tools that are available to him. Now, let's talk a little bit about socialization. Socialization is a visual, cognitive dance between two people. And we use a prefrontal cortex, the highest center of our brain, in order to discern the cues that the other person is telling us. Are we too close to them? Are we too far from them? Are we being whatever it may be, okay? So if the person is not here yet, they're going to have issues connecting with their peers. So what we see typically in children who are not there yet in the most sophisticated processing within their brain is that they are not connecting with their peers. However, they are very likely to have friends who are older than them, or they will have a connection with younger children. Why is that? Connection, control. The game of life, guys, is prediction and control. Can you control what is happening? Let's talk a little bit about anxiety. How many of you have seen anxiety is nothing other than inability to predict and control our world? We don't know what is going to happen if we do X, Y, and Z. So what do? We control our toys. We put them all in an order. We hyper-schedule our day. We are washing our hands constantly. At the grocery store, we have to go down the specific aisle in a specific order. That is anxiety. That is a way to control anxiety because, again, it allows the person to control and predict what the outcome is going to be. So that's why they routinize their entire life. So what happens to that child that you today were supposed to take to Dr. Alex's office, but you decided to move your schedule to tomorrow? What's going to happen? You just exploded their brain. So any change in the routine is going to create a problem. They're just telling us they're not here yet. So, should we punish them for that? Absolutely not. Because when a demand exceeds a neurological development, we're going to have a deflection. That deflection is called anxiety. That deflection is called hyperactivity. Let's talk about this example. You are a parent who goes to a PTA meeting, and the teacher describes your child in the following manner. They're sweet, they do their work. However, they do complain of the tummy ache all the time, and sometimes we find them under the desk crying. So we like to send them home back to you. And you're looking at the teacher like, is there confusion here? They must have switched the papers, because that is not my child. Because my child explodes when he gets home. He's actually very aggressive. He hurts his siblings or hurts himself. How do you explain that, guys? Aggression happens here. This is a person who really cannot predict, engage, connect with their world at all. They still have probably all of their primitive reflexes intact, which should have integrated and become silent at the age of 2. They are having a slew of other things, balance coordination issues. They are having issues with hygiene, awareness, a lot of other things. It's all there, and it's easily explainable. So what's next? How can I help you guys and your children? The only way I can do that is to do a neurological, brain-based neurological exam to chart your child or a family member on this chart. And then I find out, are they in a stress response? Are there any gaps? And how do we fill it? I hope that tonight you have learned and are taking away at least one nugget with you, insight that will help you connect, engage, advocate, and see your child, or perhaps yourself. If you have discovered one insight from tonight's lecture, you have made my time worth being here away from my family, and I'm sure you being away from yours is also worthwhile. Now, the only way I can help is to do an exam.